Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you. Let's do it. Serious. For those of you who like to explore abandoned some of your scary experiences, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. This was when I was a kid, maybe 12 to 13, back when me and my four cousins were little hellions. They lived out on a ranch, and we would ride four-wheelers to a bunch of abandoned buildings in the country all the time. One time we came across a bridge and decided to stop and enjoy the view. It was a beautiful day. I should mention, sun was shining, birds were singing, and the water in the river looked amazing rushing under the bridge. Then we noticed something strange. There's a metal wire tied to the rail of the bridge and hanging down into the water. Of course, curiosity got the best of us, so we decided to pull it up and see what it was all about. We pull up a deer skull, a huge one too, with large antlers and everything. Mind you, this is not within the timeline of hunting season at all. Then my cousin says, "Look over there." We see what looks like an axe stuck in the middle of a tree stump down by the river. We walk to the end of the bridge and hike our way down to the river, and lo and behold, this is not an axe. It was a deer's leg that had been chopped off and stuck in the dead center of the tree stump, pointing straight up at the sky. We rushed back to the top of the bridge and decided there was no way a deer died by itself and put its leg in a tree stump and tied its skull to a metal wire. We come to the realization that someone is hunting out of season. Suddenly, as two of my cousins are discussing whether to take the head with them or not, they thought it was super cool, but it smelled absolutely horrible. We see some hillbilly-looking men step out onto the porch of a house up on the hill. They're holding rifles. They see that we've pulled up the wire with the deer skull and start running down the hill at us. We never rode our four-wheeler so fast. We booked it out of there. We made it back to the ranch and told our parents about it. Yeah, that's a good friend to have around. Pretty handy, smart, and got you out of there. Good. Owner threatening to beat the shit out of us because he thought we were after copper. Dude was actually pretty chill when he realized we were dumb teens and not meth heads, but he did force us to give over our backpacks to make sure we didn't have any spray paint or tools. There used to be this abandoned asylum in the woods by the park near the house where I grew up. The main building above ground had been torn down, but the basement was still there, and you could enter through a small window that was just big enough to crawl through. The furniture and some medical stuff was all still down there. I was too afraid to go through the window, but my friend wasn't. He was down there for about 5 minutes before he screamed and jumped out of the window. He said something was chasing him. We could hear it down there scurrying around, but none of us wanted to get close enough to the window to look with the flashlight. A few years later, a woman got attacked near there by a gaze of aggressive raccoons. About 10 years ago, I was exploring an old rundown hotel in my city with some friends at around 3 a.m. The property owners were having serious troubles with squatters, so they had put razor wire everywhere. I was wearing thin jeans, I was 18 and stupid. I tripped on some steps and thought some of the razor wire had just caught on my jeans. We kept going inside. Soon I realized my leg is wet, and I don't just mean wet, it is soaked from the knee down. It's dark as hell, so my buddy shines his flashlight on my leg, and turns out it's blood. I have to drop my pants in front of everyone to see where it's coming from. Right above my knee is this little cut squirting blood. We all start cursing. One of the girls pukes and has to turn away. Fortunately, my buddy, incidentally the one with the flashlight, takes off his belt and sweatshirt and makes a pressure pack for it and gets me to lay down with my leg above my head for a bit. After a while, we decide we have to hike out of there, and quick before security comes back for their rounds. So we tighten the belt and we hike out of there. I try to take my pants all the way off because I didn't want to rip them over the sweatshirt. So here I am walking out of this hotel and into the subsequent neighborhood to where our car was parked in my boxer briefs, holding my leg soaked in blood from the knees down. Ended up going okay. Sewed it up at home with the help from a dude with the flashlight. He was a nifty friend to have around. TL, DR. Broke into a hotel, tripped over razor wire. Don't realize it's bad until we're all the way in. Have to hike out in no pants. Have good friends. finding 150 barrels of toxic waste illegally dumped in the Packard plant in Detroit. I stayed there too long without a respirator. I had a bad headache and felt spacey for the rest of the day. I also lost about 70% of my sense of smell permanently. This was a few years ago, but there was an abandoned cookie factory in my city. We found out if we walked down some train tracks, we could get in through an unlocked side door. So me and two other guys went exploring. We entered the basement and wandered through. It was obvious people had been there by the shitty Hail Satan graffiti tags all over what was a locker or shower room. Anyway, we come to a ladder going up to the next floor, and I proceed to go up it and realize when the company left the building, they had sectioned this portion of the building off. The ladder went up and had a curved rung to it, so they had to take a large piece of plywood and cut holes in it to fit through the rungs and laid it on the floor to block it off. I get to the top, lock my legs on the ladder, push hard on the plywood, and it comes up. There on the floor, about 6 inches in front of my face, was a glass orb. It was reflecting, there in the darkness. I'm looking at my own face and what I can make out with my light. I just stayed there for a minute, expecting something to come out of the darkness and tear my effing face off and pull me up the ladder. So I took a breath, lifted the plywood, slid underneath onto the floor, and assumed the effing Wolverine stance, like that was going to save me from the deranged murder ghost of the abandoned cookie factory. The two guys I was with get up the ladder, and we look around. We found a 6-foot-tall T-Rex and toys and all kinds of stuff. Old children's museum exhibits. By this point, if you live in my city, you most likely know where I was. The cookie factory had a nearby children's museum, and they held old exhibits for the museum in one of the empty wings of the factory, maybe for a tax break or something. I guess since the factory shut down, they blocked that part off and hoped they'd forget about it. Bonus story. We went back with a larger group, which isn't a smart idea because you make more noise, obviously, and we heard someone shouting at us. With us was a friend of mine who was about 6'3" and 300 pounds. Another guy had a gun on him just in case as well, so we're not really worried, but this is also not somewhere that you want to draw attention to yourselves. So we decided we'd better leave as we hear this person banging shit and cursing at us. We get out and keep walking, and we finally see the person in question, little crackhead in a purple Vikings jersey with a squeaky voice who was probably just trying to ride a high in peace. How come every time you're urban exploring, it's always a crackhead that ruins the party? Me and two of my friends were exploring some woods on the outskirts of my city when we were around 12 to 13 years old. These woods had old barracks in them that were used during World War II but are completely abandoned, overgrown, and run down now. To actually get to any explorable barracks, you had to go quite deep into the forest and up some very steep hills in which you used the tree roots that grow down to climb up. This was the first time me and my friends had ventured this deep before, so we're all pretty excited at seeing how far we could go and how big the place actually was. Eventually, we came to a cross path, and we chose to go down the right side. We had to squeeze our way through some tight, stinging nettle bushes, but luckily, we all had long clothes on to protect us. We stumbled out into this huge clearing area, where right in front of us was a huge building that had a massive entrance in the side. We were all astounded, as we didn't realize any buildings this big were in this forest, and we hadn't seen any real abandoned places before. Of course, we decided to go in and check it out, and inside it stretched quite deep and was very dark. Being young, we were all pretty nervous to actually set foot any further than where the natural light from the opening spread to. We hung around the entrance for a bit, messing around, echoing our voices and such. Eventually, one of my friends is looking off into the darkness with a very frightened expression on his face. Me and my other friend turn to him and ask him what's the matter, and he says, "Guys, I swear I just saw a face or something in the dark over there." Me and my friends, thinking he's trying to just spook us out, tell him to stop messing with us and we're not falling for his tricks. That's when it happened. The loud scream of an adult male fills the entire building, amplified by the echo. With that, me and my friends look at each other absolutely terrified and let out shrieks ourselves. We bolted towards the bushes. in which we came and start making a break straight back the way we came without looking back. We must have run for a solid 10 minutes straight without even stopping. Those huge steep hills I spoke about earlier, we literally jumped down and just slid down them, getting covered in dirt. We finally reached the edge of the forest and stopped running. We never did find out who was in there or why, but considering how young I was, it was definitely one of my most terrifying experiences. A few months ago, I was cruising around Chattanooga with my sister and a friend. We were on the side of town with the factory some people had told us was a pretty cool old place to check out. So we decided, what the F, let's kill some time. Anyone from the area might be familiar with it. It's the old Central Soya factory off Amencola, and there are several videos online of people exploring it. Our first mistake was going through the gate. It was the obvious way in, so we merrily traipsed down the road and onto the property. It's the middle of the afternoon, so it's bright and sunny, and the wind is blowing, so we can hear loose metal banging around up ahead. We pass the silos and end up in the loading dock kind of area. Pretty much every square inch is covered in graffiti, so we wander around there for a minute, and once we enter the building, there's a pitch black hallway to our right. F that. We stay in the loading area and go up to the second floor. My friend is walking ahead of us, and he stops at the top of the stairs to look around before rushing back down. Apparently, the entire upstairs was trashed, littered in papers and blankets and empty cans. What spooked him was the room at the far end. The half-open door started to swing wider when he looked at it, and he couldn't see anything farther than that. We got back to the main floor, creeped out and ready to leave, when we hear a voice whisper, "Hey!" Nothing else. But at that moment, the wind stopped, and the whole place went dead still. Demon possession horror movie style. We noped the F out of there, and as we were heading back to the gate, we found a message, "I can see you," was painted on the asphalt, and when my friend and sister looked back, they both saw a man walk past one of the windows. Apparently, he turned to stare at us for a moment before gliding out of sight again. And even though I didn't see him, we still had chills hours later. We've talked about going back with more people and better flashlights, but so far, no one is that enthusiastic about it. When I was younger, my niece, we're the same age, and I were out exploring an abandoned construction site at night and didn't notice a huge hole in the ground leading to what I imagined was going to be a tank or basement for one of the houses. She managed to jump over it, but I fell in and ended up with a rebar rod going through the front of my right shin. Oof. I was stuck down there for a while before she could grab my hand and help pull me out. We staggered home and packed the wound with tampons and peroxide for fear of getting in trouble. Of course, our parents found out when it came down with a terrible infection and other injuries showed up, also permanently effed my left shoulder, smashing it on the way down. I walk with a kind of inward limp to this day, but a larger circular scar is all that's really left from the accident. We were so lucky we hadn't both fallen in or gotten more seriously injured so far from home. A few years later, a kid went to school with died falling out of a half-built house, and that made it sink in all the way. Mind the caution tape, kids. It's not worth the risk. I've posted this to a couple other Ask Reddit questions, but anytime this type of question comes up, I always go back to growing up in a small rural New England town, and as a kid, would always venture into the woods and find neat old things. My dad noticed that I was really interested in exploring and finding old things near our land, so one day asked if I wanted to go see something that no one else he knew had known about. I jumped at the chance, and we drove off into the mountains and parked on the side of the road. We got out and walked into the woods for it felt like 45 minutes, and we came across this really small cemetery. There had to be 10 or so stones, and you couldn't really make out anything on them, but a couple of them that read something like 1802, 1803, and 1803, 1805. My dad said he stumbled on it as a kid, and it must have been a small family cemetery. It just kind of broke my heart thinking about how many of those stones were probably infants or toddlers.